Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this autumn morning. My name is Thomas Bellew. I'm the head of the public diplomacy team here at the embassy in Berlin. I'm joined by my colleague Elias Benmana, and together we host our Friday clubs where we bring speakers who talk about their experience and time in Berlin and in Germany. This morning, we have Eddie Goodwin, who's joining us in Berlin in person at the embassy. He's one of our first speakers in the embassy for some time. We would have liked to have had you all here in person, but things going the way they are, we're digitally, and very happy that you are joining us today. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your morning. Eddie has been living and working in Germany for quite some time. He has previously worked with Enterprise Ireland and IDA Ireland, and he's probably no stranger to a lot of you here today. And Eddie is going to tell us about his experiences and what he has learned over the years living and working in Germany, and how to actually navigate the highways and byways of the country, which Eddie knows all too well. And he will now talk, because I know you don't want to listen to me, but what I will say is, please, if you want to ask any questions, could we please wait till the end? If you want to ask a question, you can either physically wave at the camera, we'll be keeping an eye out for you, and you can also use the raise hand function in the Zoom. So without further ado, Eddie, you're more than welcome, and delighted to have you here this morning. And it seems that you have a big audience, so everybody is here wanting to hear what you've got to say. So please, without further ado, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks very much for the very generous intro there, Thomas, and to Elias as well for the organisation and the colleagues at the embassy. Great to see so many familiar names and faces there. Good morning to everyone that I know already, and hello to all the new people that I haven't yet met. So look, it's pretty early here in the morning, and I don't know whether people have had their coffee yet. So probably the last thing you want for me to do is to rattle through my CV. So what I thought I might do instead is, in the different roles that I've had here in Germany and been very lucky to have this, I kind of had to think about it before this, and thought, look, what is a kind of learning that I've taken away from each of those roles? And that's what I'd like to kind of put out today. For some of it you'll be very familiar with, for some of those, but it might just strike a chord and resonate with you. And for others then that are kind of less familiar to the German business landscape, you might get some takeaways and some shortcuts from it. So first of all, before I do that, maybe just a word to what I'm doing here at the moment, why I'm in Berlin and what I've been doing for the last little while here. So for the last 18 months, I've been with a company called Private Pier Industries, based here, headquartered in Berlin. Put together a company put together by 3 German entrepreneurs, 2 of them with a very strong brand building background, and one of them with the deep pockets on the finance side. And they came together to set up and to build brands in 3 very diverse areas. So you have 2 on the food and drink side, 1 in fashion. On the food and drink side, both of those, so 2 out of the 3 invested areas are related to premium pet food, which is sold under the name Irish Pure here in Germany. So in short, what we're doing is and it's an interesting story, they scoured the world looking for what they felt is the highest quality reputation for food internationally. Interestingly, they nailed it down to Ireland and Canada, and went with Ireland in the end, which is testament to the great quality and reputation that Irish food has internationally. So what they're trying to do, and what they're doing right now, is taking what Kerrygold have done for the dairy industry and putting that to premium pet food and selling it out into Germany and international markets. I'm not going to talk about that bit today. I'm going to talk about the second piece invested in, which is the whiskey and alcoholic spirits. So basically 3 German entrepreneurs got a real liking for Irish whiskey, the quality, the potential of it internationally to be able to sell it, and the potential for them to be able to put really strong brands around it, which they've done with Grace O'Malley, famous Irish Pirate Queen. And they've trademarked all the names around that, and then Proclamation whiskey and not going into the markets, but selling 20 markets now set up over the last 18 months. So we're going good guns in international markets. What they're doing is investing in a big way in bulk whiskey. So to put in perspective, they're now the largest independent holder of whiskey, purchaser of whiskey in Ireland, outside of the big guns that you'll know, the Diageos and Pernod Ricards. The volume is about 3.6 million bottles worth that they're buying per annum. And where I come into all this is where they suddenly discovered these brand builders and digital marketing specialists and international salespeople that how there's a need to get that whiskey into bottles, to be blended and put into bottles. And there is a serious, if you excuse the pun, there's a serious bottleneck in Ireland because of the growth in distilleries in Ireland over the last number of years. There's been a piece of the supply chain that's been forgotten about, and that's that vital piece of get into the bottles. So you have, and again, it's for another day, but there's been a growth in the Irish whiskey industry that has just been tremendous, really, in the last, since 2010. In 2010, there were 4 distilleries in Ireland, and now you have nearly 40, and they're growing at a rate of knots. So that other piece of the supply chain hasn't followed in with that. So for a company that was completely digital focused and outsourced, that they wanted every other companies to do all those other pieces and allow them to focus on the finance and the digital and the brand building side of it, they found that they had to actually, it would make more sense to fill that piece themselves. So it was a big departure, and that's where I came into it. I'd known these guys for some time, and then they approached me to look at this. So over the last 18 months, I've looked and analyzed this, whether it would make sense for the company in the first place, and if so, how would you go about doing it, right, to get to the finish line of setting up a whole industrial facility to fill that gap. We're there with that. The machines and the whole facility has been set up, and again, it's probably too much detail for today, but just to picture it, it's about 40,000 square feet, which is about 4,500. So it's a decent sized facility. It's got these big steel tanks from floor to ceiling that hold all the whiskey and the other water, etc., that needs to be mixed with that, and then all the fancy automated machines that fill those bottles that would then produce it for international markets. So, and I suppose that's part of the reason why I'm here today. So you've got an Irish guy here in Berlin that is working for 3 German entrepreneurs, setting up an industrial facility in County Louth, just outside Dundalk, that ultimately is going to put this liquid into bottles to be sold back out into the German and other markets. So it's the full circle, and I suppose it's also it's a great sign of trade in modern times, how you can actually get around that, and hopefully that will remain as is. So that's what I've been doing. I'll talk through maybe a lesson that I have taken from that towards the end. But right now, I'm going to flip back to kind of my first steps into Germany, why I'm here, why I came to Germany, why I got a fondness for the place at all. And for that, I'm going to, don't be scared, I'm putting up some slides here. It's not going to be PowerPoints, way too early in the morning for that. It's one message per slide, just as a backdrop to each of those learnings that I have taken away from the roles here. So I'm just going to try and share that screen. And hopefully you can all see that. Okay, so for my first foray into Germany, and I'm probably not alone here. I know that others were part in those times as well. It's back to the summer jobs. I'm sure a number of us that have been in Germany for some time have done these. I think, on a side note, it's a good conversation maybe for another day, is that great Irish tradition of people in third level going away, getting experience, and doing summer jobs. I don't think there's any other nation that does it the same way that Irish do, that love a travel and going out and getting experience. It's a fantastic, a great grounding. In my Enterprise Ireland days, there's a international graduate program, 16 people chosen from 1,200 each year, applicants. The first thing for me every time when I was looking at those CVs was what summer jobs had they done, because I think it's such a fantastic ground. I know that from having done it myself. So you're going back to Stuttgart 91, unfortunately not 88, it was 91 when I arrived out there first. And that was, I was 17 at the time, which is a little younger than most. I was actually in fourth year in school, and I was in a little place called Höfingen. Those in the know will know Baden-Württemberg. The Ingen is the giveaway there. South at Leonberg outside Stuttgart, an Electrolux subsidiary. I spent the summer building fridges there and having a fantastic experience. It was 7 in the morning till 3 in the day. Then oftentimes having a couple of beers with the old German guys there, 7 till 12 on a Friday, and doing the same. I just remember a fantastic. The working conditions were really good, and the salary and the payment at the time at that age was really good, but a really good learning experience. But there was one word that I learned that summer, and that was I kept hearing from those guys I was working with, which was langsam. Those who know what that means, which is slowly. And that was a bit of a red flag even for me in those fairly immature days, that we're not supposed to be going a little bit faster here, but in fact I wanted to go slower, which was certainly a little bit of a red flag. And I'm going to contrast that now with that fantastic summer in Höfingen, building these fridges and the lovely working conditions and the festivals in the sun in Baden-Württemberg in that year, 91, to fast forwarding to 2 years later to the next summer job that I had in Germany, which was in Hamburg. That year, interestingly, a pal of mine and myself, we went around every single, in Finnislin Industrial Estate in Sligo, where I'm from, we went around every single factory and were shown the door when we didn't get past the door when we were looking for summer jobs. So there was a truck there, and the last place we had at the last factory we stopped off, which is a place called Bruss, a German company. And we asked the guy there, a guy called Bobby Butler, God rest him, where's he going with the truck? He said he's going over to Germany. We said, look, we've both been to Germany. Can we get a lift over? He said, sure, and laughed and said, look, get your gear and come back next Tuesday, which we did. And we ended up getting a lift over on the truck over from Sligo all the way over to Germany. And we didn't know where we were going. And we ended up going right to, under his advice, to go to Heusdorf, which is where Bruss had their headquarter company, and asked for a job there, which we did, and we got the job. Now, literally, it was night and day from that other job that I'd had 2 years previously. We were on the night shift, 11 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning, 15 minutes break, vulcanizing rubber. It was tough work. If you think these are all parts that are going into cars, fan belts and the like, they have to be made in these big, really hot, and somebody has to do all that taking out of the ovens and cleaning the ovens and putting the next batch in, and that was us. So a really tough summer, but it was really what I took away from it was the contrast of those two jobs. And I oftentimes thought, what was the difference between them? I mean, if you look at Mittelstand type companies, the backbone, as we know, of German industry, what was the difference between those two? And one, they were both in niche areas, they were both in regional locations, they both had the run of the little town where they were based, and in export markets. So what was the difference between them? For me, and this is something years later I was probably able to reflect on more, was the fact that one of them was that family owned and very involved company, which was the second one, which is Bruss. And one of these now is permanently closed. You can guess which, and one of them is flying with 2,500 employees in US, with operations in the US, operations in Spain and Eastern Europe, and of course it's the second one, Bruss. And I always thought, what's the difference there? And I put it down to that family-owned involvement. And what they were able to do was in that second factory was to give people a sense of unity and a sense of ownership, and that they weren't able to do in the other. They were able to pass it off as, Electrolux from the overseers from Sweden, whereas in the second one it was that very involved family-run Mittelstand company. So I'm not saying that the businesses go out of business for lots of different reasons, but I always felt that was certainly one of the strong contributing factor. I was able to take away that learning and use it in very much in later jobs with the Enterprise Ireland and IDA, when you can sit across from the table of a Mittelstand company and really get to know what makes them tick. So for me, that was a learning, and I think say the factory floor is one definite way of getting to understand German industry. And I was lucky enough to be able to see both the good and the bad in terms of operations. So fast forwarding for me, I spent a couple of years in Vienna studying, did Erasmus, great old Erasmus year. It's all a bit of blur really, but fantastic of course. And then went back and did a postgraduate after that, which was fantastic, great city. But that's not part of the topic today. So I'm going to swing back to, after that I spent some time in Ireland, worked with Deutsche Bank, did some more study. And then an opportunity came up for me to join IDA, which was in a position in, as they call it, the overseas executive, which is basically going out promoting Ireland and negotiating foreign direct investment into Ireland. A fantastic, a dream job for me at the time. This was doing everything that I wanted to do, which was, you know, representing the country through a business state agency. It had the whole German angle and being based in Germany and working in European markets. And then the whole bit of business element to it. So it married all those three for me. So I absolutely loved it. Spent a fantastic 6 years there working those. Looking at time, we don't have an awful lot of time to go through today, but I certainly recommend trying to find out a little bit more about how the IDA operates. They're a really, really effective organization with a small number, relatively small number of people. And I think the results speak for themselves about the foreign companies that are based in Ireland. But in short, and what I'm going to do is talk through a little anecdote that, from that time, which I think probably talks through the job a little bit, but also the German a German business lesson, an important one that I learned from those days. So the IDA, the role that I would have had at that stage, which was managing the pharmaceutical sector, and that entails writing letters in those days, writing letters to senior management, starting off discussions about Ireland as a potential location, even if it wasn't even on their map, whittling that down to try and get them interested across the senior executive team to go visit Ireland, multiple visits that ultimately will hopefully convert into a project, an investment project into Ireland. We had one particular one in 2005 with a company called Altana, which was a pharmaceutical company. It was strategically important, apart from the fact that it was 150 million investment into Ireland for Cork. It was strategically important because Altana was owned 25% by the Quant family, familiar to a number of you, but they also own BMW. So it was an important one. As is the want with these type of projects, the negotiations were going for about 2 years, and we were at the very end at this negotiations, and that had entailed maybe somewhere around 7 or 8 official type visits over to Ireland, looking and talking to various different people, looking at the ground, on the ground, and having different meetings over there, apart from all the meetings that had happened in Bayern at the headquarters. This was at the very latter stage, and it was with the property divisions to try and work out the last pieces on the property. And an interesting side note, if you don't know, IDA is actually the second largest landowner in Ireland after Quilcha, for the simple purpose of having that land to industrialize for companies, both indigenous and foreign companies. So in the property discussions, you had our guys over from Athlone, so about 5 of our guys, about 4 or 5 of their guys sitting in this meeting room in conference room in Bayern, trying to work out the final details. And somewhere in this conversation, the Irish 990-year freehold lease dropped into the conversation. So know about it. It's a technicality left over probably from the early days of the state, or when we really started industrializing back in the 60s, that the land, whether it's Quilcha or whether it's IDA, state land, is under a 999-year lease. As we all know here, mainly Irish probably in this group, 999 years, it's a technicality. It came up suddenly, the main property guy from Altana sat back in his chair and said, "Tell us more about the 999-year lease." So discussing, look, it's only a technicality, you don't need to worry about it. You know, it's just a leftover kind of thing. Let's move. The guy said, 999 years. He said, and what happens after that? And to which our property guy turned around and said, "Oh, Gunther, I don't think neither you nor I need to worry about that." And the room broke into laughter, and it diffused the kind of bit of tension and stress there. But the conversation moved on, or conversation went deeper into this, and the Germans wanted to know about it. And apart from the fact that it was a bit of a funny anecdote that I kept with me, but there's also a serious message in there as well for anyone doing business in Germany. You know, particularly companies like that, they don't think in quarters, they don't even think in generations, they think in a lot more longer term than that. And if you want to be successful with that, you need to really embrace it. You don't treat it lightly. These guys are in it for the long term, and that's something I certainly took away with me from that role and from afterwards. Again, we probably don't have enough time on today, but I had taken a note here to talk about kind of the recession that in the early years of Germany. I see guys like Johnny Galvin here, and he would have been in the trenches with me in the early 2000s in Frankfurt. Frankfurt was a different place then. I mean, you had unions out on the streets, and Germany was going through a recession. It's interesting, and it's certainly those maybe people that are newer in Germany, I'd say that Germany's resilient. It's export focused, but it's not bulletproof in terms of recession. And certainly the fact that they missed the Maastricht deficit, that the unemployment was higher than Italy. Certainly it's worth looking into, and say for those that are newer, fresher off the boat here in Germany, I'd keep that in mind for doing business. The German economy is not absolutely bulletproof, albeit resilient. So moving on, I spent 6 years in IDA, which was fantastic. Great experience dealing at that corporate level, negotiating the foreign direct investment in. But I'd always been interested in the other side of it, which Enterprise Ireland does. And that's working with entrepreneurs and early stage companies, the innovation out of Ireland. So in effect, the job based out of Dusseldorf was doing the opposite to what I was doing with IDA, which in this case with Enterprise Ireland is assisting, first of all, consulting with Irish companies to see if they've got a saleable product or service over here, whether the innovation matches the German market. And if it does, then working with them to try and internationalize out here into the German speaking markets. So it was a completely different play. You're dealing with much earlier stage entrepreneurs, but very interesting. And so it was a lot of learnings in that for me. You would deal with, in this case, again, you would have run a portfolio. You'd be dealing with about 20 innovative Irish companies in a really intensive way, with them to bring their products and services out, and oftentimes matching them, because over 90% of Irish businesses, early stage Irish businesses, are business to business. There's very few on the consumer side. So you're working with them to try and find German companies that would match with them and partner with them and be interested in kind of the longer term partnerships with them. In some ways you're a broker between that German and Irish innovation. So a very interesting role. I did that for a couple of years before I flipped off into the US. But one thing that I've taken away from that piece of it, and those again that are here longer will have and have been involved in any kind of pitches over here, whether it's sales, marketing, whether it's finance, you name it. The key thing for learning was that, look, it's evidence-based is where you need to do when you're making whatever format of that pitch you need to a German audience. You've got to have that evidence in there. Matched with that, we would have always looked at under promise and over deliver. That was the key message we were giving out to Irish companies. Make sure that what you can say, what you say is what you can deliver. We have a tendency as Irish, which oftentimes I notice with Irish companies, which is, look, you want to try and make it work. You want to say, look, and the question from the Germans maybe, when can you get those drawings over to us? Say, oh, look, we get them to you in a few days. And that's where we as Enterprise Ireland needs to jump in and say, no, let's qualify that. Let's make it 2 weeks. Give yourself time, because if you don't get it, and you say you make it in those 3 days, you're going to get it over, and you don't make that, then you're burned. And that was something that became more and more apparent. And we used to work with Irish companies just to tweak that Irish approach to the business to the German expectation. On a slightly humorous note, myself and my colleagues in those days used to try and put a ban on any photographs of the operations of Irish companies into the PowerPoint pitch. There's a tendency from enthusiastic early stage entrepreneurs to want to show off and talk through their factory photograph as the first slide on the PowerPoint. We say, look, you can take it as a given the Germans are going to know that you have an operation in Ireland. Let's get straight down to the brass tacks of what does your product or service do, and what is it going to do for the German partner to change and improve their business and to focus on that piece. So again, it's a tweak. It's not rocket science, but certainly, and it's one that I've taken away. And even in dealing with the entrepreneurs here myself, it was something that I use, which is, look, go straight for the brass tacks. What's it going to do for your business, as opposed to maybe, and this is probably a bit of a generalization, but the US Anglo-Saxon type presentation, which is more built around the hyperbole, the potential, where we want to go and where our business is going to grow to, as opposed to the German expectation of what's this going to do for me right now. So 2 years in that role. I spent 4 years in the States. I was lucky to go over then to manage our Boston office of Enterprise Ireland, which was a great experience, but again, not for today. I would just say, on a personal note, for those, again, a little longer in the tooth, will remember that the famous expression from statement from Mary Harney back in the 2000s, which said Ireland is closer to Boston than it is to Berlin, caused a lot of controversy at the time. It would certainly cause a lot of controversy now, I'd imagine, and my embassy colleagues would be able to talk through that in a lot more detail. I'm sure their view would probably be that the relationship between Ireland and Germany is extremely strong on the political front, probably been never stronger. But again, that's not my area of expertise. But personally, certainly, it was apparent to me that on a personal front, I was closer to Berlin than I was to Boston, and I was very, very happy to come back to Germany. So in 2013, I got a promotion back into, very happy to look after the German-speaking office, so based out of Dusseldorf. What I'd been doing at a kind of called a market advisor level, and in this case, I was looking after the team of 16 there, across all the different sectors, covering the 3 German-speaking markets. And again, instead of actually doing and being, I had probably less direct contact with the companies and more then on the management side of that, and helping the others in the team. The team itself, 16, split pretty much 50-50 between Irish and German. So that was an experience, and a very good experience, a great team there. And a number of those had actually, they've been so long working for Enterprise Ireland, they're probably half native at this stage, so that was an advantage. But there was a few things I'd learned along the way, and one of them, and sometimes it's easier when you're in a management role to see these and to help others. You've slightly a step back from it, so you can see these things. But one kind of observation that I made, look, we're very complementary, our business cultures, but they are different, and you have to recognize that. One of the things I oftentimes thought, and I tried to help people in the team where there were frustrations, people came up a little bit head to head on things, was that, look, Irish Germans can be very effective, very efficient, but not always effective, whereas we Irish can be effective but not always efficient doing it. And it's just a little tweak that I think helps people to understand that, look, if you step back from that and understand it, it can certainly help you in doing that. I think some Germans think we're very lovable, but we're slightly mad Celts. And sometimes as us Irish, we can think that Germans are, they're great, but can be a little bit, a little logical, Teutonic in their Teutonic way. So once you kind of understand that, and you can help others in the team to understand it, I think certainly they work very well. The other thing, and that during that period, that was a real eye opener for me, was setting up a new office within Germany. So we did a whole analysis in that time, German market, and the guys in Enterprise Ireland certainly would check in if you're interested in those figures and details around it. But there's about 1.5 billion, I'd imagine, may even be more now, in exports out to the German-speaking markets. A few hundred companies, innovative Irish companies, working out here and partnering mainly on the business-to-business side. So lots of good stuff happening there. So there was a decision made to open up a new office. And again, I'm not going to go into the details of that, but it was very interesting for an experience for me, and also to see one of the key lessons for me out of that was how federal Germany is. It's very interesting when you go down to Munich and you tell them in Munich that, look, you're thinking about setting up a new office here, but we're also thinking about Frankfurt and Berlin. And the looks on the people faces from Munich, and they go, "What the hell are you doing? Thinking about setting up crazies? Got all those crazies up in Berlin." And up in Berlin, they'd say, "What are you doing? All those stick in the muds down in Munich?" And they'd all say, "And what the hell are you doing in Dusseldorf in the first place?" So it was an interesting eye opener to actually see the differences between Germany. But I think anybody who's been here a while would probably recognize that if you had to try and set up an economy from scratch in terms of regional spread, Germany would probably be a very, very good template to start with, albeit you've got a bit less on the east side, it's developing, but to have those hubs and clusters in the different areas, whether it be Hamburg's for ports, Berlin for tech and creativity, for Frankfurt for Dusseldorf for the old industrial and now telecoms, and Munich and Baden-Württemberg speaking for themselves. It really is an excellent spread. So I would say that was a major learning from that whole analysis. We ended up setting it up in Munich, just for info. So the second Enterprise Ireland office is in Munich. The reason is that there was just simply more of a fit of the industrial type companies from Ireland, which were a large part of that Enterprise Ireland portfolio on the export side. And there was a better match for some of those older businesses and established businesses in Berlin. But there was an equal case, strong case, that was very close for Berlin and for Frankfurt. But that whole federal piece was certainly an eye opener for me. So I'm flying through this because I know I want to leave a little bit of time. Maybe people have got, I know there's a number of people here who've got great experience in Germany, so they'd like maybe to add to the conversation. So I'm going to swing back to where I am right now. As I mentioned right at the beginning with Private Pier Industries. So I stepped out after 7 years in the role as manager for Enterprise Ireland, which was, say, a great experience, great learning for myself on the management side, dealing with Germans, Irish, setting up new offices, having business out here. But it was time for me to have a change. So this opportunity came up with Private Pier Industries. And something that I'd always wanted to do, which is if you look at that Altana project that I spoke about earlier on, that 150 million investment into Cork, when you think about it, it was something in the IDA that always struck me, is that somebody's job is on the line there, that making that decision, and that's why it takes so long to get those projects over the line. There's somebody's job, it's make or break for somebody on that. So I wanted to kind of, apart from kind of consulting for other companies and helping them do it, I want to try and walk through it myself. And this opportunity came up then with Private Pier Industries to actually do that and to set up a project in Ireland from scratch. As mentioned, that's gone from Thomas, I get some feedback on that. So where that project is at now, so it's gone from scratch. The decision was taken to take the plunge on it for a company that had absolutely no clue about industrial operations. We're now a company with a decent sized industrial operation in Dundalk that is going to be, it's got the first team hired, it's going to have 3 shifts next year. They're all already in plan, doubling in size next year. And it's not only going to be bottling for and blending for the internal needs, but also for other companies. So it's turned into a scale. So look, so far so good with it. But as mentioned, I'm now the one with the job on the line. So it's every day is a new day in terms of challenges with that. But so far so good. And in thinking about it, I thought, there's loads of lessons from it. I mean, we're learning every day on it in going through this process. But for me is the going local piece. We were able to do that, and I was on 2 trips of mine to Ireland. It's because of the pandemic. I put so many challenges in our way, so it was extra difficult. So I knew from the outset I needed to try and build a team as local as possible to manage this and get it up and running in Ireland. So I put it down here as call center tactics rather than just going hire local, because I don't know if anyone has ever heard this, but if not, keep an eye on it the next time you're calling an Irish call center I always thought it's interesting the differences between Irish and German call centers. An Irish call center, you always have to bring up, and you got to be as nice as pie. If you want to get anything done, you know, you got to be nice to that person on the other side of the line. You're going to be, yeah, if you could do it, that'd be great. Thanks very much. You're a star. All that stuff. Otherwise, they're going to say this fellow's a bit of an attitude, and we'll put him down to the bottom of the queue. That's always the feeling I got. I always got more by being really, really nice to the Irish call center agent. If you do that in Germany and you come in with all this, oh, you're a star, look, get to me whenever, that German call center agent will have you for breakfast. You got to be much firmer, you got to be much clearer, more resolute on what you need. You're nearly talking KPIs and delivery times with them. And a German business guy actually once described to me, said that, and I was talking to him about that, and he said the reason that Germans are low, you know, or the fear that they have is that being seen as being too nice is seen as being incompetent. And I always thought that was interesting. But whether you're doing business over in Germany or doing business in Ireland, the most successful people I've seen are able to tweak that a little bit, you know, be a little firmer, a little resolute, a little being able to resolute about standing over what their expectations are and what they're able to deliver in Germany. So an Irish person doing that in Germany, and then vice versa. Most successful Germans in doing business in Ireland, I've always felt have just hit that relaxed button and just a little tad, and are able to show, you know, a little bit more of that flexibility, adaptability, and go with the flow and a bit more on the warm side. But I always keep an eye on it, see if it works for you when you're calling, using those call center tactics. But for this, it's obviously a bit tongue in cheek. But for this, what was I'm really talking about for this project of going native, going local. So I would have hired the operations manager, the first person, not only from Ireland, but actually from Dundalk. So the difference being able to get things done locally and navigate it's night and day, and it's been a godsend for us. When you had situations where the supply chain team over here in Berlin are talking to our partners in Ireland and really kind of hitting a wall because simply of kind of understandings and cultural understandings, whereas you had somebody local who's worked on that site of their partner previously, they're able to just open doors so much easier. So that has been the message for me. That learning came from, if you look at Enterprise Ireland, they would have a very strong message of always hire local. If you're at a certain stage of business, once you're selling out here in Germany, you encourage and Enterprise Ireland work with companies to try and get them to put people on the ground. And interestingly, as a side note, now people don't oftentimes recognize this, is that as good as it is to have all those German companies that their operations in Ireland, that comes in at about somewhere in around the 10,000 mark the IDA use, if memory serves correctly. And on Enterprise Ireland side, you're up over about 12,000 people employed by Irish companies in Germany. So there's more employed by Irish companies in Germany than there are by German companies in Ireland, which is an interesting one. So, and there's more and more companies hiring out here the whole time. So I took that message that I've been giving out to companies all the time, and I did it for this project that I was managing here in Ireland. It's the first thing to get a team, a local team, as local as possible, and that has worked really well for us. There are lots of things I can talk about here, and there's a lot of stuff I've left off. Maybe a little funny anecdote on the German-Irish business culture piece, because that frames this discussion, and maybe why I've been asked to kind of share some of my experiences on this. But I think that's the key bit to getting it right. And I know a number of people here who have been in Germany for a number of years, but I remember there's a guy in the IDA that worked with us, a guy called Wolfgang, and he was one of the very few people, the few Germans that were hired by IDA out here in the market. And this is many years ago, but he was definitely one of the very few, if not unique, that he then transferred back over to Ireland and worked in IDA in Ireland for many years. A very popular guy, but his strategy of kind of settling into Ireland was trying to get a handle on, trying to get a grip and perfect all our mad Irish sayings, as he used to say. He used to say to me, all these proverbs and all these sayings, you know, what's this with throwing the baby out with the bathwater? You know, I don't think we realize that we use all these sayings ourselves, but we obviously do. Anyway, his strategy was to try and master these, and he thought if he had that nailed, then he'd be unnoticeable in Ireland and take it. The only problem was that Wolfgang used to get a lot of these sayings slightly wrong, and nobody would ever correct him because they're too funny. So one of his ones would be, you know, yes, that's it in a nutcase. Or another famous one of his was, careful now or you'll upset the apple tart. So when Wolfgang, he never managed to master all these sayings, of course, but when he was retiring, he had a great retirement bash, and very popular guy, and it was all in great jest. They did a presentation of Wolfgang's famous sayings. But again, like all these things, there's lessons in it, isn't it? The lesson for me is I'm not even going to try and touch the German ones. But if you want to try and get in the Irish scene and to be unnoticeable, then you got to get it right, and make sure you perfect them. So anyway, I just thought it was an interesting little one on the Irish German cultures side of it. Coming up close to about 45 minutes, I say I could lots of stuff I add on to, but it was about taking away in this. But what I certainly did want to just leave people with is to go on to the next slide. There are some links. Look, a lot of people know these already. The Irish Business Network, I think Paul is there today, and others do great voluntary work for promoting Ireland and the links between Ireland and Germany, and they have a number of chapters. Certainly keep an eye on them if you're not already on their social media. Enterprise Ireland and EI Dusseldorf have good LinkedIn followings, and it's a good way of just seeing what's going on with the new partnerships between Irish and German companies. Again, IDA, a very good social media, and I follow those, and you can just see who are the newest companies that are setting up in it. Department of Foreign Affairs, of course, everyone knows because you're already linked in here and you're on this, so you know them. And then IBEC have some very good associations. I would certainly recommend that it was an eye-opener. Ireland Irish Whiskey Association, very, very good, very involved organizations, do a lot for their members. And if anyone's ever interested in learning a bit more on the Mittelstand, which I talked about earlier on, Bernd van Oor, Professor Bernd van Oor, it's been used by Enterprise Ireland. We use them a lot, and put together programs for Irish companies to come over and learn from that model, that Mittelstand model. So he's kind of the renowned world expert on that. He's got in some interesting publications, and called Dr. James McCabe is very good on, we touched on some of the cultural differences here, but if you're ever interested in, we've used him with Enterprise Ireland regional conferences. He pulls no punches. He insults everyone, but he insults everyone equally. And it's a good way of people learning, whether it's for your companies, for yourselves, but particularly for companies and group together. I thought he's very entertaining and very interesting. Interestingly, the ones that we've done, neither the Germans or Irish took too much offense. We were able to laugh it off. The French and Italians were a different story. There's a lot of sulking going on, but for another day. So look, just at the 45-minute mark, I'll close it off there. I hope that was somewhat useful, and hopefully people I'm sure will have points they want to chip in and additions to that. But anyway, it was very nice speaking with you this morning.
Thank you very much, Eddie. That was quite fascinating, very much interesting for myself. I've been coming over to Germany for 22 years, and just that little bit you just said there about the call centers, I've had experience with that, and if you're too nice, they'll have you for breakfast. So there's a lot that you said there that I'm sure a lot of people will want to ask you questions about. And with that, I won't take up the floor, but I will open the floor to anybody who wants to raise a question there. If you just want to wave at the camera or actually raise your digital hand. And we have one already from John Galvin. John, if you'd like to come in there.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, Eddie. Fantastic presentation, really thoughtful, really enjoyed listening to you. Also, as someone who spent a lot of time in Germany, all the messages really rang through. I wanted to ask you about the IDA because I think it's fascinating. You mentioned, you know, how successful it is, which it, you know, obviously is probably the most successful around the world. And I know many investment authorities are looking to emulate what IDA has done. What is the secret sauce in the IDA? And what's the culture like within the organization? And you know, maybe a few bullets on why it's so successful.
Yeah, sure, Johnny. They have, I mean, interesting. The IDA is less than about, I don't know the exact figures, but about 300 people. So it's a pretty small and tight organization. Where the IDA have really cracked it. They're focused and they got in very early. And when nobody else was doing really that direct marketing to companies, they were doing it. So a lot of that groundwork was, you know, was laid in the 70s, 80s. For us, they were coming in 2000s. It was easier, but really it's about hard work. I mean, if you look at the number of meetings that we were encouraged to have and targets are, like, I've worked across the private sector, I've worked across the public sector, and I haven't seen any targets that are as driven and as adhered to as with the IDA. Simple targets. So you have about the number of meetings, and then those number of meetings convert into site visits that turn into projects, whether they be expansion projects or new projects. And now they even have numbers of jobs per person. So you would have an executive in Frankfurt and they're expected to deliver X number of jobs. So it is seriously driven, and you know, state agency, but I say they work very much like private sector. So it's about that activity. We would have been working about 100 meetings a year. So if you're trying to get a meeting with a senior executive, CEO, board member, that's not that easy. There's work involved in it, and a lot of them didn't have Ireland on the radar at all. Never mind. And you'll remember, Johnny, in 2001, the Neuer market had collapsed. I was working the software portfolio for IDA. So you're going into companies and you are looking to try and get them to invest into Ireland, and they're looking at you like you're two heads. You know, they're closing down operations and all the rest. So, but really, it's about that. It's got a very, very clear agenda. It's very hardworking and driven, and they just keep the messaging as clear and simple as possible. But the other piece I would say about it in actually delivering the projects, you hear a lot about this Ireland Inc. But when you see it in action, there really is. The rest of, say, Team Ireland, whether that's other parts of the government, other parts of industry, and I've seen that here with putting this project together. You know, revenue in Ireland, the level of professionalism is good. We were always known for our adaptability and our flexibility, but the level of professionalism in Ireland that I've experienced in putting this project in has been second to none. And that's whether it's county councils, whether it's the partners in Ireland, the suppliers, have all been really, really good. But a quick story on it works. I remember when we were dealing with SAP, looking to try and win a second investment into Galway, the operation in Dublin. This was about 2005, 2006. So there was a lot of competition for this project. And Ireland was really top of the list. But I know IDA fought through it, endless meetings and site visits over to Ireland, putting the best foot forward, doing everything they could to do it. But this Ireland Inc. piece, I'll show you how it actually works in practice. So we were sitting in a meeting, and it was with the board of SAP, a board member called Oswald there. And he had one question during the whole thing. His VPs and his ex-VPs all had lots of questions, but he had one question. Galway, he said, can we land the corporate jet? So we look in kind of panic. So myself and a guy called Dennis Kern, who was a project manager, we left the room, managed to get through to the manager of the Galway airport at the time. And his answer back was, look, if the runway is enough, we'll build it. We'll extend it. So that was it in practice, how it actually works. We were able to go back in within an hour, give that message to it. And that was his concern allayed. And that was the type of networking and the type of approach across the board in Ireland that's still there today that helps to win the project. So it's not just IDA. IDA is there with the message, the promotion thing, but you need all that other piece behind. and all the other layers with it. Interesting, of course, Galway Airport's long gone now at this stage, and Oswald's retired. But from my experience of putting this project in, a lot of that's still all there.
Thanks, Eddie.
Okay, thank you. That's quite. John, did you want to come in with another secondary question there? Or?
No, I'll let someone else ask a question.
Okay. I don't see any hands up currently, but I know that Elias, my colleague, would like to put a question to you, Eddie.
Yes, so thank you very much for this informative presentation, Eddie. I really enjoyed it. And one thing that struck me was when you mentioned that Germany is an export-oriented nation, and I believe that this also applies to Ireland, because in terms of agricultural exports, Ireland is definitely a very important partner for Germany. And the big success story for the branding of Irish agricultural products, I would say, is Kerrygold. And this makes me wonder now, what would you say to an Irish company that is seeking to enter the German market when it comes to branding and how to design a brand? So is there a secret sauce that applies when you're doing market research in Germany? What are the challenges for designing a brand that is also that resonates with a German target audience? Maybe I would appreciate some thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's interesting because this company, Private Pier Industries, the 3 German entrepreneurs I mentioned, that was what they honed in on, and what they looked for. What is the highest quality? Because for food products coming from other countries, and Ireland was right up there. And Ireland has a great reputation. Board B have done a very good job on that as well, of promoting that in Germany with their chef beef clubs and the like. So I think for Germany the most important thing is quality, and there's an absolute move towards premium, and that's I think that's probably across the board. The whole green agenda, Germany's very strong on that, and I think that's only going to get stronger. So if you're not in those areas, then you really have got to know, you're probably in a price play. But if you're building brands and you're not somewhat encompassing, whether it's green, very high quality, natural, all that piece, maybe even there's a lot of people going in, whether it's food, into the whole vegan area or touching on it. So all the frees, X-free, that's all very important there. So I think, on that pet food side, the most important thing was we're able to say that all the proteins were in Ireland, were manufactured in Ireland, and you have that high quality, beef fed grass. Now the branding is all about, you'll see the cows and the sheep that are perched on the cliffs of Moher, munching on grass. So it's simply basically taking what works and relevant for humans. And then also, because in the pet food area, it's interesting, and I was reading up on that, see that people actually in times of recession, they'll save on their own food before they'll save on their dog's food, which is an interesting one. So I'd say, look, in short, there's an absolute move towards premium, absolute move towards green and natural. I think Paul.
Thank you very much, Eddie.
Paul, do you want to come in there with a question?
Eddie, thanks very much. It's been very interesting. I just had one quick question. You mentioned with Altana, the 2-year cycle with negotiations. I work a lot with German business people who are negotiating in the English-speaking world. Would it be a fair generalization to say that maybe Irish companies might expect shorter negotiations, quicker decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that we battle with over here, is that in those days with Enterprise Ireland is trying to change those expectations of companies. The problem is in Ireland is that because we're caught somewhat between the great European market over here, but because of language and historical reasons, we maybe lean towards the US business model, which is much more quicker decision making, as you say. So you need to just pull them out. But Irish companies are adaptable. And once they can see it, and once they get their heads around it, like there's value in this long term. If we put the investment in now, the smart ones know that that's a lucrative route for them. But the automatic reaction, and you'll see it if you're home and doing business in Ireland, like a lot of even the dress, the talk, the language that's been used because of the influence of multinationals in Ireland, a lot of Irish industry has, has taken that on, and that's natural. But that doesn't always fit over here. So you need to change that.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Ronan, you want to ask a question there? You've got the floor.
Yeah, thanks very much. And thanks, Eddie. Very interesting presentation. Just before my question, a little aside, I have a feeling I actually interviewed for the same job in 2002 with the IDA as you ended up later doing. So you took that job off me. Thanks very much. And I was actually based here already at the time. And I've been here ever since. But a question tying in a few points you made. You mentioned the thing about the airport, the runway in Galway. With the answer, yeah, of course we can extend the runway if they need it. And you said earlier on in your presentation, we'll get that job over to you in a few days, and you had to correct and say, no, guys, say 2 weeks. The whole Irish thing about saying, sure, it'll be grand, we'll sort it out somehow. That's something I've encountered a lot over the years. Do you have any good examples or good experience about how you kind of match up the two, the Irish way of saying we'll get there in the end, don't worry about it, and the German desire to have absolute clear deadlines and clear KPIs and so on, and bringing those two worlds together so that everyone can be on the same page at the end?
Yeah, because the way of say, like, we'll get it over to you. We'll get sorted. Whereas the German expectation of actually having specifics that are held to what the Irish companies we used to advise is that you oftentimes you have one chance to make a first impression, and we do a lot of kind of seminars, training courses, and it was easier because it was supposed to Enterprise Ireland was able to do that, and you could talk to maybe 100 companies and educate on, look, here's the kind of way it's done in Germany, here are the expectations. So kind of group seminars and education around that way was a good way of doing it. It's hard to sometimes get that message home, and one-to-one companies don't always want to listen to it, don't want to hear it, or they fall back into it and say, oh yeah, well look, we'll. But one way of doing it is maybe going back afterwards on email, or encouraging them to go on email and just put, look, here from the meeting, we'd like to reframe what we thought were our expectation or what forecast of getting that over to you, and look, we'll adapt it to this and give yourself some more time. So when people are out of the meeting, oftentimes when the blood is rushing through the veins in the meeting and people want to try and get it be as positive as they can in the cold light of day on an email afterwards, sometimes that works. And Germans oftentimes like that, the specifics of an email afterwards, framing what was said in the meeting and what the actual actions afterwards. And usually Germans are fine if you in that early stage to say, look, we did say we'd get over those drawings over to you in 3 days, but in fact, speaking with the engineers, we're probably going to need 2 weeks. And if you get in early and do it and quickly reframe the conversation, you can usually pull it back. But the worst thing is just to let it go, get the guys do the work, comes in a week, and then they already think, look, it's sloppy. So if you can get in early and just change it, adapt it, that can work. So it's again in other markets it wouldn't be as bad. The US and that, and spending time in the US, it was interesting to say in the US that oftentimes I came across some business people and they would kind of joke and rib the German 5-year plan, kind of 5-year plan for a startup. How can you have a 5-year plan for a startup? But that's the way people want to do business here. They want to have that weather, and they want to have those forecasts in place. Whether they're going to hit them or not is another question. But it's that desire for having kind of concrete information to have kind of to have basically those forecasts, something in black and white is a real need, and I'm sure you know it yourself and been here that long here in Germany. So you're just trying to get the Irish companies to see that that is the way it is. Reframing it with an email afterwards, I think, is usually can get you out of Dodge.
Sound advice, Eddie. Thanks for that. I'll remember it myself. Ronan, do you want to come in there again? You had your hand is still up, or no? Fine. Have we any other questions coming from the floor? Paul Cahill, I see you raising your hand there. If you'd like to come in.
Good morning, Eddie. Thanks very much. Very interesting talk. It's not a question. If I can just maybe make an observation from your comments, if I may, about talking to people on the phone. I find the Irish accent in German is very helpful. And if you can have a bit of gravitas in what you're saying, but with Irish humor, and mix that with speaking English, I find that extremely helpful, that you know what you want to say, but if you can be sort of humorous with it and then put in a bit of English with it, people say, oh, that's a foreigner, that's not a German. And then you get a lot of sympathy on the phone, and they tend to help you moving along to talk to the next person. Also, talking on the phone, I found very often that people will talk to you for half an hour about their dog, about their gardening, about something. And this is the bonding process. So the thing is to be patient and let them talk for half an hour. And I've been in this position several times, and I've never met these people, but we do great business with them. So they want to talk to you, get this bonding process going on, and then that helps a lot. Just one other observation, if I may, about the federalism here. I think it's really interesting in Germany, the way they take foreign stars like Rudi Carrell and Alberto Blanco, because they're not German and they don't come from the different regions, and they like them as a neutral presence within their entertainment industry or whatever. Just to sort of, that's my sort of thoughts about your thoughts on that. That's all I wanted to say, not a question as such. But thanks again, Eddie. Great stuff.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. I can see Colm, you've got your hand up there. You want to come in with your question as well, or your comment or observation?
Yeah, please. Sorry, it's very late, so I'll make it quick. Eddie, thanks very much for that. Just one question. We were targeting large corporates with a lot of international trade. You mentioned SAP, that would be one of them, for example, Siemens, those sort of companies. Presumably they would, or would they have acquired some of the American style of doing business as well, just like Irish companies based here or American companies based here employing Irish people would have acquired an American way of doing business. Would that also apply maybe to big internationally trading German companies?
Certainly more so than a Mittelstand or of that type of company. Novartis, for example, in Switzerland, they're fully English speaking. They frown on people speaking German, although they're headquartered in Basel. You'd have a lot of international staff in places, international executives in places like SAP. But at the same time, SAP tries to distance itself from companies like Oracle. That would be, the Larry Ellison, swashbuckling Larry Ellison. The corporate headquarters is much more low key than Oracle's towers. So the mindset would probably be definitely leaning towards German, but at the same time they would be open very much for dealing with international suppliers, and they probably have a quicker decision-making process. I imagine either in software, B, they're very international. So yeah, look, it's like more influence, more outside influence. Like if you go to a widget manufacturer, like one of those ones I was talking about earlier on, like let's say Bruss in Hamburg there, and you're trying to partner with them, you're gonna be certainly find that first of all they're probably slower. Second of all, they'll drive a hard bargain if I know them. So definitely, if it's a software company, if it's an international multinational, there aren't too many examples of those on the software side in Germany. I mean, SAP is nearly unique. You had other ones like Software AG and those that are no longer there, but some of the companies that are more, let's say, hardware focused on those, like Bosch was a company they recently set up in Ireland. We knocked on their door on the IDA for years and years. They wouldn't even talk to us. But now I see that they've set up an engineering facility in Ireland, which is fantastic. But there were companies that you would find that even though they would be very international in those days, at least, and they would have been very Germanic. We couldn't even get meetings actually with those. So I'd say SAP and some of the large pharma companies there would be very international. A lot of international board, including an Irishman and that. So they would be definitely more kind of leaning towards that, which has all probably come, a lot of that now from Silicon Valley, if you think about it. And that's probably a conversation for another day.
Great, thanks. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks, Colm, and thanks, Eddie. I'm very conscious that people are probably wanting to get off to work at this time of morning. And with that, can I just ask, is there any more questions or observations? Raise your hand now. Otherwise, we'll move to finish off for the morning and to thank Eddie for taking time out of his day. And indeed, I could mention here that Eddie has very, very recently become a father, and he has a bonny daughter, Alicia. And it's very gracious, very magnanimous of him to take time out to be with us today for this Friday. And you mentioned earlier, Hoffingen had drinks with the lads in the now defunct closed fridge factory, but not far from Stuttgart. But we have one small gift. We have another one that in the pipeline, which will be related to your new arrival. But this is Pub Life, and it's a book about Irish publicans across Germany, some of whom you probably have met. And this is just a little thank you that you can throw on your coffee table and look upon from time to time, and maybe say when you're going across Germany again, when you're distributing your proclamation and other whiskies and whatnot. And I don't know, when you mention the bottleneck, it strikes me what you do for recycling or reusing bottles, but this might be a sort of a guidebook for going across Germany. So Eddie, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been a real pleasure, and it's been very insightful for myself and for my colleagues, and I'm sure for everybody else here who's attended. So thank you very much, and wish you and your wife and Alicia all the very best for the future. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Thomas. Thanks, Elias, and thanks everyone for dropping in. Hopefully meet you in person again soon. All the best.